Welcome back to the pub, everybody. You know, there's a lot of episodes, maybe almost every episode, where I say this is a special one or this is going to be a good one. But this one's special for a lot of reasons. Stone, we've reviewed a beer by Stone before, not one of their mainline beers. Well, I think now it is, but it's not one of their original beers, one of the beers that they're known for, the Fear Movie Lions IPA. But this is one of their originals, man. This goes all the way back to 1997, the Arrogant Bastard Ale. Back to the beginnings of the Stone Brewery down in San Marcos, California. This beer was probably my first exposure to real craft beer. Back in 2007 that I discovered this beer. And my older brother lives in California. And going down to visit him at the time, we would go, I was under 21, and I would still be sneaking into bars down there because legal drinking age in Canada was 18. We would sneak, you'd get me into bars, and I remember it was like kind of an exciting thing because I shouldn't be here. And they were a little bit stricter about checking ID down there too than they are in Canada. They don't care up here. But that beer scene in Southern California, specifically in the San Diego area, was booming back then, and Stone being a huge part of that. And we had gone to the brewery together, and we had even just local restaurants and bars. They all had Stone beers. And I remember seeing Arrogant Bastard for the first time. And this was back when craft beer was not as prevalent as it is right now. Just the name, Arrogant Bastard Ale, at the time was a little bit shocking. It was a little bit outside of the norm of what you would see. Now breweries are so playful, right? Microbreweries are so playful. Nothing shocks you when it comes to craft beer. But this at the time was really stood out. It was really out there. And I remember being on my first trip down there and finding this beer. I couldn't wait to get home and tell my friends about it. It's like, oh, I found this beer called Arrogant Bastard. They're like, what? Really? No way, And I actually brought a bottle back in my luggage. This was the first time I brought a beer bottle like across borders. Back in the very beginnings of my beer exploration days, I remember I brought it back and I showed my friends, like, look, it exists. And like the branding on it with the gargoyle, the slogans with the saying, like, you're not worthy, and the whole thing that goes into the branding of this beer. It was cool to be a part of that Southern California, San Diego specifically beer scene, which is still thriving to this day and even bigger. I mean, Stone's become the behemoth that it is, being owned by Sapporo. But I have a lot of connections to this beer, man. A long story. A long person to say that.
I love it, man. I love it. And I honestly can't wait to dive deep into tasting this beer together because I've had it before like you have too. I don't have a deep of a connection like you do, but it's amazing to hear the stories. And I think I'm going to appreciate this beer more after tonight. So I'm really looking forward to that. I love when you have a connection to a beer because it just like brings you back in a way, not only from the flavor perspective, obviously, but also from a connection standpoint. So every time you have it is going to remind you of that first time that you tried it. Yeah, it's like time traveling. Exactly. Yeah. I personally have tried this beer a couple of times before. I've always thought it was a delicious beer.
I haven't had it in years. Obviously, they don't sell it in Canada. I had to bring this back from a recent trip to Florida down to visit you. I've had it mostly on tap, bottle once or twice, but it's going to be interesting out of the can. So the story about this beer is really cool. In 1997, they first brewed it, I mentioned. This beer was an accident, funny enough. So I believe it was when they were coming up with the recipe for one of their original pale ales that there was an accident during brewing, and they basically came out with this. They loved it and they reproduced it and they kept doing it that way. But it wasn't designed to be like this. It came out of a happy beer accident.
That's awesome.
Cool story. So 7.2%.
We're up for a fun
7.2% alcohol. We are. And we got some tall cans here too that we picked up at Total Wine together.
Yeah, 19.2
So yeah, we're in for a good time.
Ounces.
True arrogant bastards refuse to be ignorant. Know where your beer comes from. That's right.
I was just reading that, man.
They used to, on the bottles, not so much on the cans, on the bottles, they used to have like a whole story on the back saying like, along the whole lines of you're not worthy and true beer drinkers don't drink fizzy yellow beer. And it's like, you probably will not like this beer. That's how it always started. I remember the first line on the back of the bottle.
I remember that.
The can's a little bit more conservative. But let's do it, man. Let's crack this open. Let's get this review on the road. I'm excited.
Let's do it.
Oh, there it is.
Okay.
Yeah, that's actually like a funny thing. Stone used to be very critical of fizzy yellow beers, and I think now probably as part of the whole Sapporo connection, but they actually brew a lot of fizzy yellow beers. And they actually have like a Stone American lager, and it's kind of like a light, like American style lager. Look at that. What a beautiful looking beer. Look at that dark.
It's awesome.
Dark amber color with that kind of like caramelized sugar colored head. Beautiful. All right, buddy. Aroma cheers.
Aroma cheers. I almost went in for a sip. Like, that's a good
I know,
sign.
right? What do you think?
Oh. See, it's funny to go back and try it. I haven't had this beer in years, and
same.
I would say, my friend, we've beer traveled quite a bit since.
We have, man. We have.
But it's amazing how there's just like certain notes that stand regardless of where you've been, and they just remind you of something very specific. And with this beer, to me, is like the character of the hops. It's very pungent, but one thing that I really like about it is that it has this very clean yet rich malt presence that surrounds everything.
Yeah.
But it's almost like a crown around the hop jewels that are in this beautiful aroma. Like the hops are really like what is drawing your attention.
Let me just pull these things out.
And then you have like this malt that is just sitting there beautifully, and you can't ignore it. It's just like beer poetry. It's really, really good. I'm gonna start off with a 3, my friend. Like I find, and maybe it's because like recently we've been revisiting a lot of more hoppy beers. It's extremely well done.
Yeah.
That's the right way to put it. I'm serious. Like, I just want to take a sip. That's always a good sign.
Yeah, whenever you're doing this and you're sniffing these beers and you actually start salivating, that's a really good sign. It's very savory. I wouldn't go as far as saying it's kind of umami like. It's not meaty at all, but it's savory. It's deep toasty caramelized malts. Yep. The hops are there too, and it's this perfect, beautiful balance that just intrigues you. It's not overpowering. It doesn't smell like toffee like or super sweet like some high ABV ales might. It's very strong but subtle. Yeah, man, I'll agree with you. I'll start high. Why not? Let's start with a 3. All right, buddy. Let's go in for a sip. Cheers. Happy to be tasting this one with you, man.
Likewise, my friend.
Oh yeah.
Oh, now there it is.
Yeah. Whoa.
I remember this.
Keeps going. Keeps going.
I can't believe I haven't had this in such a long time.
Yeah. I know. If they sold this in Canada, it wouldn't be a regular because of just the intensity of the high ABV.
Yeah.
But I would definitely have this in the fridge to occasionally crack into when I felt like getting a sipper,
Man, this is such a good beer. And I love how the moment I took a sip, it immediately reminded me of that experience. It's like, oh yeah, I know this beer. I've had it before. I can place it. And that sign of not only a good beer, an excellent beer, however you want to call it, but the fact that they've been able to achieve that level of uniqueness that identifies them. That's quite an achievement in my opinion.
Absolutely.
I think the first thing that comes through when you take a sip is that rich maltiness, like that, you described it very well. Like, it's not quite toffee, but there's definitely like some leaning towards more like cake-like character. But it's just a fraction, because the moment you get past that, then the hops are starting to build up, and there's all these sorts of aromatics and bitterness that shows up, resembling of like English pale ales, like when it comes to like almost like dark fruits, raisins. And it's just like really punching you in the face. And that's why it's called Arrogant Bastard, like, which I like. Man, I'm going to stay with a 3. This beer is unique, and it does it beautifully. So 3.
Ooh. It's I love that I have this big can because I can do multiple refreshers along the way. It's always a nice little perk when doing these kinds of things. I forgot how complex and how intense this beer was. My memories of this were having it on draft, boiling hot day, into like a bar on a beach, ordering a pint of this, surprisingly enough. And at the time, I didn't even have the palate to appreciate the beer. Really, it was strong, and I had to battle through it, which I liked. Yeah, it's so intense with the hops. It's not really fruity or citrusy. It's very just like sharp, lasting, coating bitterness. It's impressive. You really taste those hops. Toffee like a little bit, dark fruit for sure. I'm gonna go with a 2.5. It's a bastard. It like kind of like the Backwoods Bastard. Remember that?
That's
Founders
it, my
Backwoods
friend.
Bastard. Those beers are bastards to get through, and this one is too. And that's what makes it beautiful. That's what makes it amazing. What a beer experience, man! All right, mouthfeel refresher. Let's top this off. Look at that. The body of this beer, like its head retention is really impressive too.
It is
Dark ruby red beer. Wow.
So I know, my friend, you've had it on tap. So I'm curious to hear your analysis here. I have never had it on tap. I've had it in the bottle, and this is the first time trying it in the can. I find the carbonation very pleasant. You can tell, and you can also tell by the head retention, like you were describing. Fine bubbles, very cleansing on your palate. No oiliness or stickiness. Like considering the presence of the malt, like I would have expected some, but there's none. The bitterness is obviously one of the main elements of this beer, and it translates, I think, in my opinion, a little bit on the mouthfeel. You can tell it's a high ABV beer, but it's not unpleasant. It's not unpleasant. It's very well balanced.
It's got the thick body of a high ABV beer, like you can tell. Yeah,
exactly. It dries out your mouth, like it
does.
It's that intense. Well, that might be interesting and unique. It's probably the only thing that I find a little fatiguing. Again, and that's just like a personal opinion. There's nothing wrong about it, so I'm going to stay with the 2.5. If it wasn't that drying, it would be slightly more sessionable in my opinion. But then again, that's also the characteristic of the arrogant bastard. So it's a fine line.
And in my opinion, I from what I remember from visiting the Stone Brewery, kind of not early on in their existence, but early on enough in their existence, all of their beers used to be like this. And I know that they've made a shift now to creating more palatable, marketable beers. Fear Movie Lines, for example, that IPA was just like a very, very drinkable, very balanced, very sort of standard hazy IPA. But this one is very much like original Stone in the sense that they pound you with hops. Mm-hmm. They pound you, and it's challenging. And that was the appeal of them. That was kind of like, and they didn't hide from that. But I agree with you that it dries your palate out because it's so bitter. And it does get challenging as you get down towards the middle of it. And even the Stone IPA, I know the Stone IPA is really famous and it's really well known and it's really loved. Do you remember the time we were in a bar in Tampa together? We ordered a Stone IPA just to split just a bottle.
I remember.
Because I was curious. And I poured it out and you tried it and we were both just like, no, I can't. It's just not. It was just too much.
It was too much. I remember. It's funny. That's another good anecdote that we had together. I remember the bar. We were I think we were with our friend Drew that came.
We were with Drew.
Yeah,
the
pool hall. Yeah.
I don't think Drew had gotten there yet. We were waiting for him and we were sitting at the bar and I ordered a Stone IPA. Yeah. And similar effect. And that's kind of the detraction from these beers for me. I'm actually going to go with a 2 because I find that just to be borderline unpleasant. How it dries your mouth out like that. Okay, finish. What do you think? This is this is good. I have to write a novel about this.
So, and some people might disagree on this, but I think what I'm going to choose to do for the finish here is that I'm going to look slightly past the bitterness that
you have to
sits. Because I think that's kind of part of I decided to make it a part of the mouthfeel, and I think that's where it belongs. So if we leave
that's a good point. That's a really good point. Dude, we have matured as beer reviewers. Look at this. We're compartmentalizing characteristics now like that and saying that we're going to keep that as part of the mouthfeel. This is maturity to a next level, man. I'm impressed. I'm impressed by you. That's amazing. But I know what you mean, and I agree.
It would be unfair to bring it back on the finish. And the reason why I'm saying is that it's because it plays like a big part initially, but then it fades. And that's actually one thing that I very much like. You start really enjoying those like very subtle notes of like the toffee note. You have this slight licorice, dark fruit, typical of more like British ale. And then you get like these floral notes and herbal notes again, and there's slightly bit of pine note at the very end. So there's a lot of aromatics that are coming from the hops, from the presence of the malt, and it's a very long-lasting finish. Now, that might be to your liking or not. It happens to be something I really enjoy. I think it's a very complex and well done journey that like makes you want to go back in the glass. I think I'm gonna go with the 2.5, my friend.
That's always been the appeal of these beers for me. It's like it challenges you. It pushes you to that point where it's like borderline unpleasant, but then when you get past that and you get used to it, then all these other characters come out once you can get past the bitterness, and once you level off with it. There's beautiful notes of malt, beautiful fruity, sweet, like caramelized character down there, and it's so complex. I am going to go with a 2.5 too. I'll match you on that. That's very fair. Challenging, complex, makes you think. It's great, and the way it leaves you, I find it makes you want to go in for another sip, almost because it does leave this sort of lingering dryness and bitterness where you just want to take another sip and wash that all away and refresh everything. So it works. Now, man, as an overall beer experience for Arrogant Bastard, beginning 10, what do you think?
Man, there's one element of this beer that has kind of like shocked me. The fact that you're able to take a sip and identify the beer is sign of like greatness. So for that reason, and for the fact that it has like this beautiful and like very borderline edging, like do you like it or you're not, like you described, like you don't know, it's pushing the limit. It deserves the 3. It would be unfair to not recognize like how well they have achieved those characteristics and how much they've pushed the boundaries in a time and place where not a lot of people were willing to do that. What do you think?
I think I have all these intangibles with this beer, of course, all these memories that I have and all these associations with it, and I appreciate it so much for being sort of like the trailblazer. Again, for me personally, sort of helped evolve my beer palate. After trying this was really what forced me out of my back in the days where we just, me and my friends get together, we just drink whatever cheap macro lager was available at this corner store, right? Whatever was cheapest, really, that's what we drank. We didn't really discern between what we were drinking, and if something was bad, it was almost like a joke, like, oh, how bad, what's the worst beer we could find for the cheapest? And then it's like a challenge to drink that, just because you were young kids, you didn't have any money, and it was just, that was part of it. You weren't drinking the beer to enjoy the beer necessarily. So this was the first beer that I had that sort of pushed those boundaries, and it was like, oh, okay, you need to think about, you need to break this down, not have an initial reaction to it, and you need to understand what you're tasting and build up a palate for it even. I'm going to land on a 2.5, I think, with the overall, because if I try and look at it objectively, there's still an element of fatigue that kicks in for me as I'm drinking it. But still 2.5, extremely high score. Look at that. So different categories. For me, it came out to a 4.16 on 5, which is an excellent beer. For Mr. Alessandro, a little bit higher, 4.66 on 5, which is actually an outstanding beer. So we wound up in different categories with this. That's so interesting whenever that happens. Yeah, it's got like such a creamy, nice thick head. It's such a beautiful looking beer. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Let us know down below, what do you think about Arrogant Bastard? I am sure, I'm calling it right now, there's going to be people in the comments saying that the beer is not what it used to be and they changed it, they changed the recipe, blah, blah, blah. Yep. I'm sure that anytime you have these established beers that have been around over time, especially if the brewery's been bought out by a bigger corporation, I'm sure we're going to get those comments down below. But so bring it on. Let us know what you think. Has this changed? Longtime drinkers of Arrogant Bastard. Is this the beer that you remember?
But no matter what you do, don't forget to close your beer brackets.
Hey, never forget. And click that beer bell. That beer bell's going to let you know when we're hanging out in the pub. And so YouTube will be like, hey, go to your fridge, grab a beer, and join Joel and Alessandro in the pub.
And if you're dreaming,
Have yourself a beer.
and if you're dreaming, don't forget to check the beer fridge.
Good callback. I love the lucid beer dreams. Cheers, everybody. See you next time.
Cheers.